Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I am pleased to be joined by Monalisa Foster to talk about her brand new release, Threading the Needle, which is out on December 5th. Miss Foster, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for the invite. I'm thrilled to be here.
So my first question for you is if you have a pitch or summary for the book that you can provide.
I'm horrible at these, but I'm going to give it a try. Threading the Needle is a story about Talia Merritt, who is a sniper that was wounded in the line of duty. She has a cybernetic arm now, but it's also a constant reminder of what she has lost and what she is trying to get away from, which includes her reputation, one that goes by the moniker of Death Handmaiden. We meet Talia on Gordon. If Japan were a planet, it would be called Gordon. It would be that one. And what's really neat about Gordon is that the capital, which is called Sakura, is technologically advanced. We would feel very comfortable there because it's got our level of technology. There's a spaceport, there's cars, there's cell phones. But the rest of the planet is very primitive and undeveloped. And the further you go out from Sakura, the more primitive it is. And Talia has come to Gordon specifically for that kind of lifestyle. Like a lot of the colonists there, they are willing to trade all of these modern or advanced amenities for freedom. They want freedom from the corporations that are running Earth and from the governments that are running Earth. Having just worked off her indenture, Talia goes out to the frontier for a job. And she decides to go to this little town on an island. The town is called Turui, partly because her old sniper partner retired there, and also because that's where her job offer is from this guy named Signore Contesti. And she is to be a marksmanship instructor for his men. But once she gets to Turui, she finds out that Contesti didn't tell her the truth. There's a lot more to it. She ends up turning down the job because she doesn't want to go up against her old sniper partner. He tells her the truth about Contesti. So even though she has come there to find a new life, she gives it up for her friend. She doesn't want to go up against her friend. And even though she does everything to avoid conflict and getting drawn into this war that they're having, and it's a war about terraforming technology because the colonists are trying to terraform the island. So even though she doesn't want to be drawn into all this, she ends up being drawn into it because her friend's reputation and her friend's life, and truly the life of everyone on Gordon, is at stake. So that's where the story starts, more or less.
And you mentioned some connections to Japan, which I can tell, but I also noticed a lot of connections to Westerns in the style it was written, the idea of having the sheriff. What were the inspirations to include a Western bent to the sci-fi? And did you have any examples that you drew from?
So one of the few things that we had because I was born in Romania and I lived there for the early part of my life, was that we would get what I would call bokoi films, which was my way of pronouncing cowboy because I didn't speak English. So I was familiar with swashbuckling adventure type stories, mostly starring Errol Flynn and even John Wayne. Now they weren't in their entire format because they were chopped up by censors and they were dubbed, obviously. But I fell in love with the pirates and the cowboys and Westerns and that kind of adventure in general. And the John Wayne movie, El Dorado, was my inspiration for this. I have watched that film, I don't know how many times. It's one of my favorites. I really love the idea of going out to save a friend, of giving everything up for a friend, because you have that camaraderie between veterans. And even though in the John Wayne version, we don't get a lot of what happened between the John Wayne character and his friend, I wanted to kind of explore that and play with it and kind of give it my own interpretation of what it might have been. So that was the inspiration for the story. And you'll notice some similarities in the beginning. like Talia arriving in town, and there's a reason why they meet at an onsen, which is a Japanese bathhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a lot of influence from the spaghetti westerns, and Japan adopted the spaghetti westerns and the American westerns into their film culture as well. They even made a Japanese version of Unforgiven, believe it or not. And so for me, samurai and cowboys have always been connected somehow. I love the movie with the Mission Impossible guy. I'm drawing a blank.
Tom Cruise.
Thank you, Tom Cruise. The Last Samurai.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's not historically accurate. I don't care. I just enjoy that kind of story. And so I've always wanted to play with this idea of samurai in the Old West. And I think that this was the perfect venue for that, because it's space opera. And it's one of the reasons I love writing in the genre, is you can take the old and mix it in with the new, and you can have you can still have a story that makes sense, that's plausible, that's believable, but you can still have all of these adventures with familiar things like horses and trains and things like that. And you can have that alongside spaceships and little robots if you want, if you can make it work.
It definitely felt very grounded in that most of what was happening I could see being believable. And there were certain things like the dogs, which were robots, and other things which were obviously more getting into the science fiction elements. But a lot of the story to me felt so real that you don't have to be a sci-fi fan to enjoy it. If you are a Western fan, you'll probably enjoy it. So
I'm
that
thrilled
has
to
good
hear
there.
that.
Yeah.
I am thrilled to hear that, because that's what I was going for. I wanted that lived-in look that was accessible to a lot of people. You don't have to be a sci-fi aficionado to really get into the story. And if you are, great, you'll still be able to get into the story, because there's enough science fiction there to satisfy your appetite for that kind of thing.
So you talked in your pitch about how the main character is a sniper, and we're seeing a lot of the book is post-sniper time, after she's kind of left that behind. She's looking for employment, but she's not actively a sniper anymore. But that's such an integral part of her backstory that you learn. What was the process like trying to include that backstory without making it feel exposition dumps? How were you able to make it feel natural that you included that information?
Well, I knew at the beginning that she was going to be a sniper. We were looking for a military specialty that made sense for somebody that somebody that's short. She's not an Amazon. She's more of an average kind of woman. And what would make sense for her physically, and also given the background of what was happening on Earth, which I don't get into very much in the book, but it's sort of up here.
Yeah.
So I modeled her after World War II female snipers. And I did a lot of research into their biographies and their histories and stuff like that. And it was very interesting to me that most of them didn't particularly like what they were doing. And I can't blame them. I mean, it's like Susie, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, I want to be the coolest assassin in the world, or the coolest sniper in the world. You just don't hear that. It's something that comes out of necessity. It's because you don't have a choice. It's because you are doing it for your country or to save the people in your unit. It's not a glamour thing, right? It's not something you dream about to grow up. And one of the things that we used to do in Romania is we used to have an illegal radio in the cellar. And my uncles and my grandfather and my great-grand uncles would go in there to listen to Radio Free Europe, which was the secret broadcast the communists were trying to jam. But when I would go down there with them, and I would listen to all of their old war stories from World War II, because a lot of them were veterans, and some of them were snipers. And one of the things I remember about it is that idea of, you do it to save lives, you do it to save your comrades, but you leave the job as soon as you can, because it's not a particularly pleasant, it's not a pleasant profession unless you're a psycho, which is, like somebody like Jared Rhodes, the man that she ends up going, he enjoys killing, and Talia does not. So for me, in trying to develop her, I tried to get inside of I tried to put myself in her place. I tried to get inside of the heads of the snipers. And I didn't know that she was going to be Death's handmaiden until quite some time into the book. And then I had to go back and figure out why she would have this moniker and what it would do to her. And I would imagine that it wouldn't have been very pleasant for her to have that reputation constantly follow her, especially after the war, when she wanted to just get back to living a normal life.
Yeah. I can imagine that it would be awkward, that people might not want to be around someone with that kind of reputation. And it's also funny that that also has a more comical nature as you get towards the end of the book, especially with Rhodes, which I find interesting. So you have her as the main character, and she's probably the viewpoint character for the whole book. But there were also a lot of minor characters that I enjoyed, particularly Logan. I'm gonna pronounce is it Timonen?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Logan. I really enjoyed him being a doctor of exomycology, and his fascination with the funguses and with the plant life, I thought was a great balance for Talia, who's usually very serious and very getting the business done oriented, and he's constantly going off and doing something else. Was that a conscious thing to have such a foil for her character, and how did his character develop?
He was the comic relief.
Yeah.
And I initially sat down. I was in, again, playing off of the El Dorado movie. We had the James Caan character, and one of the things that was in that movie that always kind of bothered me was that John Wayne tried to teach him to shoot like once, and you can't hit anything. You just we'll give you this sawed-off shotgun, and you just aim, and you just and I'm always going like this when I see that scene, because I thought, oh no, you can't do that. And I wanted to have somebody that she could in a way mentor. So he needed her for protection. He initially tries to hire her to be his protection, because he's not very confident in himself, especially going out from Sakura and into this town. And like a lot of scientists, he's obsessed. And I know this very well, because I used to work in physics. So I know what it's like to have that laser focus where all you see is the object of your obsession. For him, it's fungi. They're everywhere. And he would need a mentor or a protector or a minder just to keep him out of trouble anywhere, because he's just so focused. So he kind of he started out rather skeletal, and then just developed as the story went. And I think it was just natural to have him be this foil for Talia, because you're right. I wrote her as a very serious woman who has a past that's dark, and she's constantly living with this phantom and the loss of her arm. So she needed, or I felt that the story needed a foil.
And then you have the main villains, particularly the main one, which is Signor Contesi. Did you have any inspiration from any film or books or shows for him as a villain? And then also, did you always plan on having the secondary villain of Rhodes, or did he come in later in the process?
That part I didn't plan. That part was mostly came out of the character or interactions about what we needed as far as who was making life difficult for the colonists, because they had been there for a couple of generations, and they were almost to the point where they had solved this terraforming problem. And of course, now this corporate bigwig comes in and says and wants to take over. And that I thought was something that would resonate far more with people today, especially in the world that we live in, than making it something more characteristically Western. So that was an upgrade in terms of milieu. I wanted to bring it into more of a contemporary type of problem. So he came out of that. And then this, as far as the secondary villain with Jared Rhodes, he kind of appeared at the spaceport when I was writing that initial scene, and I actually went back and rewrote him several times as I discovered I need to have another foil for Talia. I need to have a villain that is exactly like her, but has made the decision to go to the dark side,
Yeah.
opposed to Talia going to the light side. So that's where he came from.
I could tell that Signor seemed more a foil to Lyle because of their conflict. And since Talia was the main character of the story, she needed to have something on that. Because at the beginning of the story, I was like, there's no way Signor Contesti is the only obstacle in her path, because that just wouldn't be quite as interesting. So once I saw Rhodes come on, and once it was obvious where you were taking Rhodes, I thought, oh, that makes sense. I can see where this is going now, and I like that. I do have an editing question. Did you find that some authors I've spoke to, particularly with Baen, they write the whole book and Baen has very little edits, and then some authors they turn it in and they rework the whole thing after they've turned it in. So where did you fall on the spectrum of once you've turned it into the publisher and what they wanted changed? How different was the book afterwards?
There was one major change towards the end that Tony wanted done. It was one of those, it wasn't like do this or else. It was more like, if I change this, will you buy it?
Yeah.
And she said yes. So of course I made the change. But that was the only one. So there was one thing that she wanted different. And after she read it and she told me why it didn't work, I'm like, oh, yes, okay, yes, you're right. I'm going to change that for you. And I had to insert several scenes towards the end. And then she said that there's certain things that needed to be foreshadowed better, which was a real challenge because it's a single viewpoint novel. And I usually write multiple viewpoint novels, sometimes 7 or 8 viewpoints. Not all of them are major viewpoints, but usually have like 2 or 3 major viewpoints and then 4 or 5 minor ones. But this was my first single viewpoint novel. I've written short stories from a single viewpoint, but never anything this long. So it was very challenging foreshadowing things with a single viewpoint. But I loved that exercise of it. I think in the long term, it's made me a better writer because now I know, oh, I have to do this. And I know now that I can do it even with a single viewpoint. So that's awesome.
That is nice that they have things of this is what I would suggest putting in the book. But they're oftentimes editors are very respectful of the author's process and also realize the author may have stuff that they really care about in the story. So they could give you the option and they say, you can do this, but this is probably what's going to happen with the book, or you can do this. And the idea of writing a single perspective, the single POV, did you think about making it first person ever, or did the plan to be third person pretty much stick with it?
So if I made it first person, it would have to be, the whole story would have to be a memory. It's first person retrospective, right? So then it would have shifted, I think, the tone of the book. For one thing, you would have known that she survived. Otherwise, who's lived to tell the story? One of the reasons I like using third person is because you don't have that automatic, they're going to live. So I think third person gives you more tension. And I wasn't sure how much of that older retrospective narrator we really needed in the story and still keep it more or less a plotted story rather than a more of a personal. And I don't want to say character driven and plot driven because then we have to have a discussion about what they all mean. But more of an adventure rather than an internal journey kind of book. And I think if I would have gone to first person, it would have ended up more that way and less how it came out.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, there are certain authors I know that are very, very much into one or very much into the other. The ones that I find most fascinating are the people who can switch back and forth between past tense and present tense. Have you ever tried doing present, or do you usually stick with past with your writing?
There's a section of that's a mind dump from Talia. That's present tense. I I have a hard time staying in stories that are present tense,
Hmm.
because unless it's commentary, so unless
Yeah.
it's a mind dump, the he says instead of he said really just
Yes.
throws me out of the
It
story.
it does for me too.
Yeah. So it has to be a certain kind of story. And John Ringo does it in The Last Centurion.
Hmm.
So it starts out as this great mind dump of his opinion, and it's all in present tense. But when you get story event narration, he switches to past tense, because then you can stay in the story. And then he switches back to present tense when he goes back inside of the character's head.
Yeah.
Um, so that kind of story I can get into, but most present tense I can't. And I really didn't want to muddy the waters, and or I wouldn't want to muddy the waters with, oh, this is present tense narration versus present tense mind dump with past tense narration. So
Hmm.
that's why I usually go past tense.
Yeah. Uh, and then the next question I have is was the book always intended, is it intended to be a standalone, or do you have other stories planned for this universe, or like how what's the planning process out for this?
So I love the fact that you think that I plan any of it, because I don't. I am very much a pantser. Um,
Okay.
I usually sit down with an idea of the genre that I'm going to write in, the word count that I'm going for, not that I stick to it. But I'm not a discovery writer in the sense that I sit down and I have no idea what I'm going to write. So I always
Right.
have some idea,
Hmm.
but I don't plot. So I thought this was going to be a standalone initially, because I set out with the very deliberate intent of giving the reader a complete story with a
Hmm.
beginning, a middle, and an end, but leave it open so that we could have other characters going on adventures in the same milieu. And once the story was going through the editing process, I was going through and making changes, and idea here, something you could write a side story here, or you could develop this character more. So there's definitely the possibility that it will have more and become a series. It really is up to the readers, because if they love it and they make it into a bestseller, then everybody's going to be saying we want a sequel. So there it is. How's that for an
Yeah.
answer?
Yeah, that is the mark of a working author is you always answer with it could be a series, we don't know.
Well, I
Um,
wrote a short story for the Baen website that went live yesterday called Relics, that's set on the Earth that Talia left behind.
mhm.
And I didn't know that story was going to exist when I wrote it. It just came out. I said, okay, I need a story. I need it to be 8,000 words. And I did it. I made one.
1,000 words.
8,000.
Oh, 8,000. Okay,
8,000.
I was gonna say that is impressive to get it down to 1,000.
I've written 1,000 word flash, but 8,000 is pretty short for me.
Yeah.
But that's all that they would give me, because they're stingy with their word count.
Have you worked with Baen on any previous anthologies or collections before?
Yeah, I've been in a bunch of their anthologies. I've been most recently in the Ross 248 anthology, which is hard science fiction.
Yeah.
Been
Mhm.
in the Robo Soldiers anthology, which is military sci-fi.
Yeah.
I have, and uh, World Breakers, which is about sentient tanks and other sentient machines with weapons, but so it's military sci-fi.
Mhm.
Um, the Founder Effect, which is part science fiction. Terran Over the Wars of Liberation, which is military sci-fi. I think that's all of them. I might be missing one or two, but yeah, I've done short stories, mostly military SF for them.
So you're definitely familiar to longtime Baen readers.
I hope so. I mean, I've only been doing it for like 3 or 4 years, but
Oh
yeah,
wow, that's quite a lot of short stories for just a few years.
yeah, yeah, it is. I've been very fortunate.
Do you have any other books that you have written that you can talk about, briefly give a little pitch or information on them as well?
I have a space opera, an epic space opera series called Ravages of Honor. I just finished the last book in that series called Lineage. Let's see if I can make this appear on the screen. Um, it is they're hefty books. They're very large
Yeah.
volume, but it's far future, not of Earth.
Yeah.
It is about it's dual protagonist. It's about Cyteria, a woman that gets drawn from a primitive society through a wormhole into a far more advanced society with genetically engineered samurai. There's nanotechnology. The genetically engineered samurai, the Donai, wear swords on their spaceships. I make it work. It has very strong romance arc, but it does not fade to black. So if you don't like that kind of stuff on page, then this might not be your thing. Do it's there.
That's a good. I wish more authors would be that circumspect with it, because there's. I'm one of those that I prefer to fade to black. So that's a nice thing that you put that out there, because you give us the warning.
Just a warning, I
Yeah.
don't fade to black.
And then do you have a blog or a website or anything that people can contact you if they are reading the books and enjoy them and want to follow you?
I have a website. It's monalisafoster.com. I also have a Substack, which is for writers. I write a post related to the craft of writing. You can contact me through my website, of course, and also through Substack. And I'm also on social media. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I think all of those have some sort of messaging capability. And I would love to hear from fans. I want to know what you think of Threading the Needle. And I want to know that you want a sequel.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to talk to your audience.
And you can find the book in a lot of places. I know it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and it's out December 5th in paperback and ebook. Is it getting an audiobook release at all?
I don't know yet. I don't know yet. I think that's something that they're still working on, and I don't know where it is. I'm sorry.
Okay, just wanted to verify. All right. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.